This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. In just a few moments, you're going to hear from my friend Don, who is the co-CEO of the Champion Group based in Birmingham, Alabama. Don is an amazing guy who's doing some awesome things for schools, specifically Christian schools, and we dive into all of it on today's episode. So please enjoy this next episode of the School Success Podcast. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater, joined by a new friend out of Birmingham, Alabama, Don Carmichael, who's the co-CEO of the Champion Group, and they are an powerhouse in the fundraising world for Christian schools, any organization that's looking to raise money, any type of school, and they have some super sweet services and products. And I was like, man, we have to have him on. He's an awesome guy providing a great service to schools. So I know this will be a great resource to all of you that are listening. And I'm hoping, as always, you guys can take at least one thing from today and go, man, I'm going to run that program, or I'm going to use that to raise money, or maybe hire Don and his team to come in and help you guys out as well. So I don't want to take any thunder away from Don. I'll pass it off to him to introduce himself. So Don, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Hey, Mitchell, thank you. Thanks for the chance to be here. And just for any of your listeners here, just to clarify, my role here is to serve, not to sell. So anything that I can share that will give takeaway or value or help them be more impactful in the ministries God's called them to, that's my role. So we'll see where this goes, but we'll have fun for sure in the process.
I love it. Well, thank you for plugging that in there. And I always like to ask the guests in the beginning where they're about a little bit about where they're from. So you live in Birmingham. So I always say, if I was to go visit you in Birmingham, what are we going to do for fun? What's really cool to do there in Birmingham, Alabama?
Well, here's the interesting thing. So Birmingham's a lot cooler than most people think. Now, not temperature wise, but just in terms of just cool factor. But what's interesting about my background, I'm the fifth generation on the same street. So we have family going back to the founding of the city. So if somebody's interested in coming to town and seeing just a lot of the really interesting historical stuff of the state and going back to the early days of our country, we can do that. If you want to do some more contemporary stuff, we have an amazing food scene. We have some of the top restaurants in the country. They keep getting ranked that way. We have just a lot of ministry dynamics. And what's interesting about Birmingham has for decades has been ranked as the top or one of the top highest charitable giving per capita cities in the country. There's a real spirit of generosity here. There are lots of thriving ministries and nonprofits in terms of how that's reflected in our culture, because a big part of the Southern culture is serving focus, right? But specifically in Birmingham, what's interesting is this culture of giving back and serving and generosity actually goes back over 100 years. And when you look at the two largest business service organizations, so Rotary International with Rotary clubs and Kiwanis International, so both of those have tens of thousands of clubs around the world. The largest Rotary club in the world is in Birmingham, and the largest Kiwanis club is in Birmingham.
Wow.
So the culture is about serving and generosity. That's from my time with you today. I'd say that's what I'd love to do, but this is an open invitation. Anybody who wants to come to Birmingham, consider this a free ticket for lunch, coffee, dinner. So we'd love to roll out the red carpet for you.
Oh, I love it. And Is barbecue a big thing in Alabama?
Very much so.
What kind of barbecue are we talking about here?
So we're talking about really incredibly good barbecue, primarily pork more than beef or brisket. And what you'll find is not only really, really good barbecue restaurants, but if you happen to be in a quest like I have been for 30 years to find the very best lemon icebox pie and chocolate pies, if you want to get a little unhealthy, onion rings, you will probably find no better place than a good barbecue restaurant. And we have lots to choose from.
Okay. Well, I know
Yeah.
when I married into a North Carolina family, and she was like, "Oh, it's vinegar barbecue is where it's at." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. Like, I want barbecue sauce, like on my barbecue, or no barbecue sauce at all, like nothing. Just like give me the actual taste of barbecue."
That's
She's
right.
like, "You can't ever do mustard. You can't ever do anything." I was like, "What?" I had no idea that there was other forms of barbecue until I met my wife, and so it's like a fun little competition. So would you say, you pulled pork? What's the style, I guess, you guys do there? Is it mustard, vinegar, barbecue sauce?
There are very few that do the vinegar. One of the best restaurants in Birmingham, barbecue restaurants in Birmingham, called Ollie's, went out of business about 20 years ago. They were vinegar based. There's not a lot of dry rub or mustard based. Most of it's going to be more sweet sauce. And what's interesting is there's also some restaurants that'll do white sauce barbecue, which is different flavor, very, very good. Now, true confession, love barbecue, but in the last 10 years, my wife and I and family, we've been more on a sort of a healthier food kick. So we don't eat as much as we could, but anybody that comes to town, we'll do it if you want it, because there's great options.
Okay, I want to try some Alabama barbecue if I come visit you. And
Come on.
I love barbecue. I got a smoker in the backyard, and it was funny at church on Sunday. I smoked it all night long for, as we're recording this, everybody, it's Father's Day. It was Father's Day weekend. And I said, I was smoking a brisket, and I told my pastor, I was like, man, I was trying to have it done in time. I was going to bring you some brisket. He's from Texas, loves barbecue. And he's like, well, I'm going to be here till 1:45 if you want to. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I'll rush home. So I rushed home. I cranked it up a little hotter to finish it off, rush it down there. And I filmed him and everything. I let him cut it, open it from the paper, all that. And he was like, Mitch, this is one of the best barbecues I've ever had. It was a brisket. I smoked for 19 hours on the grill. It was incredible. It was so good.
Nice.
So I love barbecue.
Nice.
Well, tell me a little bit about your company. Before we dive into maybe all the things you guys offer and what you do, I'd love to know just a little bit about your start, how you got your start into the fundraising world, and a little bit about your company.
That sounds good. Let me just set it up in terms of for viewers, because we're a few minutes in and we're talking about barbecue, and they're probably coming here to learn how can we raise money. There's some really smart ways that Christian schools can raise money that are not only significant from a dollar standpoint, but significant from a missional engagement standpoint. And one of the things that we helped pioneer about 15 to 20 years ago is looking at more, can we utilize students and families in service or missional types of fundraising activities where they're actually helping people in the process of raising money for the school. So one of the things back in the late 80s, I moved to San Diego and went on staff ultimately with Josh McDowell Ministry. And in 1989, we did a traditional golf tournament because we thought, hey, everybody does golf tournaments. That's how you raise money. Well, we did one, and it was very well done. We had almost 200 golfers. So it was a big event, flawlessly executed. When it's all said and done, we did the old entry fee model, which is how almost all of your golf tournament fundraisers, 5K races, fishing events, bowling events, almost all of them built on the same revenue model, which is entry fees from the participants plus corporate sponsors. So back to this event in 1989, extremely well executed, almost 200 golfers. When it was all said and done, we grossed $45,000, but we spent literally $30,000 of that on the golf course, food and beverage, gifts, golfers, etc. Our $15,000 net, if we took that $15,000 net and factored it against 6 months of our staff time impact to organize it, it was a net loss. And we felt horrible. And so we ended up just asking two significant questions. Number one is, how can we change the revenue model so that we can actually generate more money instead of the normal entry fee model? The second question we asked was, how can we change this whole golf experience to create an entire new event experience, because everybody does the same golf tournaments. By the way, we do very few anymore. But back then, and the Holy Spirit was really involved in leading all this, because we really were submitting this in prayer and just asking him to give us wisdom so that we could be better stewards of the money we're trying to raise. We did two crazy things. On the revenue model side, in terms of how we raise money through the event, we all had to raise our own salaries as domestic missionaries. So you go to your friends and family and church, and they support you financially. We thought, why not see if our golfers will raise money like we had to? So the thought was, what would happen if we could find 40 golfers that had a heart for this ministry, who were willing to give a few hours of their time going to their friends and family, and they could raise $2,500 a piece. That'd be $100,000 at 40 golfers. So we thought, okay, let's try this. It's a fundraising model versus an entry fee pay to play model. And then the other question was, in terms of how do we create a unique event experience that has wow factor, signature branding value, something that stands out against all the other charity tournaments that go on every year in every city. We have a friend named Paul Lewis, and very creative. And he thought, what would happen if we rented out a golf course and we gave every golfer his own golf cart? We teed off at sunrise and we played until sunset, and we just could play as many holes as we want. When we looked at it on paper, it looked like it might be possible to play 100 holes in one day, but we didn't know if anybody could survive it. So we trial tested this in April of 1990 in Memphis, Tennessee, actually a suburb called Germantown, at a country club called Farmington Hills. We had about 33 golfers. Every one of them played over 100 holes, or 100 holes or more. They raised over $70,000 on this event, and every single one of them came off the golf course saying, this is the most fun I've ever had in my life on a golf course. When are we doing the next one? And all of a sudden, the Lord revealed this whole new crazy concept that had wow factor. It was fun. You know, anytime you can bring fun into a fundraising process, you really win. We like to quote a statistic. In fact, if you're watching this now on the podcast and you're taking notes, write this down. And the question is, I'm going to pose it to you, Mitchell, and just see how smart you really are, okay? What percentage of American adults truly love to raise money? Let me rephrase it. What percentage of American adults love fundraising? What do you think?
I'm gonna go low. I'm gonna go low ball here at 10%.
10%. That's so cynical sounding. All right. Do you want to know the actual statistic?
I'd love to.
0. So we don't know, but basically we know it's really, really low. That very, very few people truly love to fundraise. So the question is, how can you create an effective fundraising environment to get people to do something they don't want to do? Well, one of those back in the golf marathon days is fun, because if we're having fun, and especially if we can position it where it's not intimidating, then all of a sudden you've created an opportunity for people to really raise money. By the way, we ended up doing Josh McDowell Ministry doing these tournaments all over the country with this new model. I was the national director for what we call the Ironman Golf Marathon Tour. And we called it that until I got a letter from the Ironman Triathlon Association's lawyer saying, you can't use our name. So we changed the name. But we formed a company in the early 90s prior to this one and did over 1,200 golf marathons all over. So a lot of experience. And what we saw is over and over ministries were set in within that ministry world. Many of these were Christian schools. I'd say the majority were not. They were just parachurch ministries. But the majority of those, a significant majority, were setting their all-time fundraising records. And when you boil fundraising down, it's really not about an event, or really not even about process as much as it is relationship. Most people think that in order to see a donor write a check or give more significantly, that you've got to sell your cause to that donor. And it's not true. It is true for a small percentage of people. And it is more true when you're talking about very sophisticated, major level giving. But the vast majority of people give because of relationship. And there's a phrase in fundraising that says, people give to people they know. So anything you do fundraising wise, the more you can create a relational connection and get people to ask people they know, people give to that. People give to relationship. But I took us way off track. I think your question was, how did I get started in fundraising? And that was the doorway in. And here we are 30 plus years later.
Man, and you said don't do majority of golf events. Is that on purpose that you guys don't do that?
Yeah, so let me explain that. Golf is actually a very poor event, and believe it or not, for decades has been a rather poor event, but people don't know because we tend to replicate what we see and hear. So most Christian schools, we go to other Christian schools, say, hey, how do you raise money? Well, we do candy bars or we do golf tournaments. And so you go, okay, well, you sort of replicate and perpetuate what oftentimes are bad practices. So let me explain a couple of reasons why golf is a really bad event from the standpoint of fundraising. Let me just, first of all, pitch this question back to you, since I know we want to keep this a little dynamic. What do you think the average charity golf tournament in America raises after expenses? Okay, so these are golf tournaments designed to raise money. What's the average net profit on a charity golf tournament in America?
I'm going to go $10,000.
Okay, that's a better answer than most. Most people think $20,000 to $30,000. I would have put myself in that category. The actual answer is less than $5,000 net, and it's around $3,800 to $3,900 net. Okay, so let me explain that, and then let me just, within the context of answering the question, why golf tournaments are a very poor way to raise money. Let's start at the big level, and then I'll answer the specific money question. At the big level, the big problem is several. Number one, most people can't play golf. So statistically, less than 15% of adults in America play golf. Of those who play, a lot of them don't play well enough to feel comfortable in a tournament environment, because most of these are going to be men. And as men, we tend to be very, we're sensitive egos, and we don't want to get out there and really look bad, because it makes us feel bad. And so when you're doing a golf tournament, because only 15% or less can play golf, the first thing you're doing with your ministry potential donor base or your parent base, if you're trying to use this as a parent leverage golf tournament, the first thing you're doing is excluding 85% of your adult base, because they can't fit. Second reason golf tournaments are a really poor event choice for fundraising is that everyone does them. So you look at a community like Birmingham. So we're a city of just over 1 million people. And it's declined a little bit, but we used to have around 20, we'll just call it 20 golf courses to round it off. So guess what? Every one of those golf courses does charity golf tournaments. They do them throughout the season from spring to fall. So a normal golf course might do anywhere from, well, let's just call it 10 charity golf tournaments over the season. You take 10 charity golf tournaments times 20 courses, you're talking around 200 charity golf tournaments in one city, medium size like Birmingham. They're a dime a dozen. There's nothing exciting about them. They're just sort of drab. There's not energy. So it's hard to create a distinctive event that has energy, that draws people into, that are actually going to bring money to your school. So the biggest problem, though, is the revenue model. And this actually is a write down if somebody's taking notes, because this is paradigm shifting in terms of how you raise money. Let me just throw in for a moment, Mitchell, because I know I sort of jumped in and I'm sort of talking a lot here, but let me quickly give credentials why people should listen to what I'm sharing. So over the last 30 years, through the Champion Group, in a company prior to that started when I was with Josh McDowell, we now have experience from over 2,800 major fundraising events that have been conducted in 48 states and throughout Canada. These events have raised well over $100 million. So there's a lot of experience in this arena, especially in the arena of using major events to generate significant money. So when you go back to looking at golf tournaments, and this applies to any entry fee fundraising event, 5K races, sporting clay shoots, etc., fishing tournaments, depending on the part of the country you're in, bowling tournaments, hockey tournaments. Okay, almost all of these charity events use the same revenue model of entry fees from the participants plus corporate sponsors. Well, let's just keep in the golf vein, because this will be transferable across the board. The average, if you can follow me here, the average entry fee has for decades been $100. It's a little over $100 now, but we'll just say $100. Out of that golfer's $100, you have to back out golf, gift, and food, right? So you look at a typical golf course now, it's about $60. Food's going to be about $15. You may get some of it donated. Gifts generally $10 or $15. But by the time you take that $100 and you back out all the expenses, you really are lucky if you're netting $20 out of that $100 as profit. So let's say you have 100 golfers, which is a large tournament, and you're making $20 net profit on each one. How much net profit have you just made?
$2,000. Yeah.
$2,000 after all that work. Also, from an expense ratio standpoint, you start with 100, you spend 80. What percentage of your $100 is going out in expenses? 80%. So for those reasons, golf tournaments are a very poor choice. Now, what if you're looking at sporting types of events to be money generating, and there are better events that are not sporting types, and I can, if you want to, we can talk about that in a moment. But look at events that can involve everybody, where there's not a barrier to participation. So 5Ks with a fun run, 1 mile fun run, that almost everybody can do that. Walkathons, anybody can do walkathon. They just don't have any energy or power. You'll also find that walkathons tend to be more female and children dominated than male dominated. So if you do events like that, a lot of times you're not tapping into a lot of the dads business money networks. So each one has different flavors and pros and cons. But what you're ultimately looking at is, how can we create an opportunity to draw in everybody where there's not a barrier to entry, and position them comfortably and maybe with energy to go to their friends and family, say, hey, would you sponsor our family in this event for our school? So, yeah.
So this is, give me some ideas. I want to share a couple, and you tell me like, hey, we're already doing that, or hey, that is a good or bad idea. So golfing, I've always thought it'd be a fun idea, and maybe this does exist somewhere. It's just actual place you go pay and play. But you got putt golf, but you got big 18-hole golf courses. I was like, man, if they could combine it where you have like a miniature golf course, but there's obstacles, and like you're playing with different things, but you're hitting long drives, but there's suddenly like something that comes out of the forest and it knocks the ball down or whatever. And like, I don't know if there's a way you can make like a 1-hole course where there's obstacles and you have the people try and get what's the least amount of strokes you can get in there. And it's funny because there's different things coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
That would be something that could be done.
They're all what's the word? Just sort of different flavors on the same theme in a way. But short answer, yes. At a strategic fundraising level, probably not the best course. But let me give you some examples of things we've done over the years. Yeah. So you can do night golf. You can actually get glow-in-the-dark golf balls, and you can play in night at dark. It's fun. It's different. You can do events, and we've done lots of these. So what I forgot to mention a moment ago, back with the Josh McDowell event, we created the 100-hole golf marathon. So those were all 100-hole events, and we were surprised at how non-exhausting they were. They're still tired, but that's probably the best example where you're generating energy off of a wow factor theme of 100 holes in a day. It's fun for the golfers because they can go to their friends and say, hey, look, I'm going to try. It's sort of a bragging deal. I'm going to try to play 100 holes of golf in one day for my daughter's Christian school. I'm trying to raise $2,500. Would you be willing to sponsor me? Would you consider sponsoring me for $500 or whatever you're comfortable with? Oh, and by the way, if I don't survive, then you don't have to pay. So there's like that fun side to it. But we've done events where certain holes you can only play with a putter or a 5-iron or a driver, so you have to play the whole hole. For about 10 years, we combined walkathons because everybody can do that with golf tournaments. We call them golf and walk events. First one we ever did was with Rose Hill Christian School in a little town called Tomball, Texas. This was a school of about 140 kids. And because the fundraising is based on relationship and being smart, and then the day of event occurs at the end of that campaign, they raised if I remember right, $104,000 or $106,000, and $70,000 came from the walkers. I remember now, $34,000 came from the golfers. So it was a $104,000 event. But what we did there is when the kids and families came out from the school to walk 9 holes, we pushed all the golfers to one side, like the back 9. Kids walked on the front 9, and each one of the tee boxes had a different devotion from some senior high kids, or they had games and activities on the fairways like sack races or balancing a ball with a spoon in your mouth. For the little kids, we did a couple of treasure hunts in the sand traps, and we had coins and little plastic jewels. So yes, you can do a lot of things to dress it up. Putt. Now in a lot of places you can do Top Golf. But when it's all said and done, what you're really trying to do is engage adults to go into their adult networks. That's where the money is, not so much the kids. So you want to use events that can do that well. Sort of a segue to where you can go away from golf and maybe some of these more recreational events into things that have more impact is going back to 2004. Our church in Birmingham, at the time called Church of the Highlands, a very strong, fast-growing church, very impactful. We started what we called at that time we called it One Prayer, but basically we call it Serve Day. It's one day of the year where at that time we had about 500 small groups in Birmingham. Now there are over 2,000. But all these small groups adopted a day-long service project, and they did everything from inner city cleanups to doing devotionals at nursing homes, and going into shut-ins houses and cleaning them and doing yard work and repairs. Just a whole range of things. So my family, we had our four daughters were young at the time, but we went into part of inner city Birmingham for a Saturday along with some friends, and we just spent the whole day getting hot and sweaty and dirty, and we cleaned toilets on the inside and kitchens, and we did yard work and landscaping on the outside. We came home that night as a family, and Mitchell, I'm sure y'all have done similar things, but we came home tired, exhausted, dirty, and totally exhilarated because we had spent a whole day serving people, and the character impact on our children and the whole idea of being able to set up conversations with our kids about gratitude, serving others, being fortunate for what we had, learning how to love people who look different, and all those things. We had that opportunity to do that with our kids. And so I found myself reflecting on it because I'd become a little, not cynical, but just a little disturbed that for, at that point, 13 or 14 years of my life had been spent doing golf tournaments and all these fun things, and there's nothing wrong with them. But I kept thinking there's got to be something better than this. And I started wondering, could we take a service-based event and monetize that as a major fundraising opportunity for a school or ministry? So we trial tested that in 2004 with a Christian school in Colorado Springs, Evangelical Christian School or Evangelical Christian Academy. And sure enough, they raised more money than the golf tournament. And there was a whole new level of energy. But more importantly, there was a whole new level of conversation opportunity with teachers and their students and among parents and their kids to talk about serving, giving, those hard issues that are such important character virtues. So it really sort of changed the direction of our company, and we began to do more and more mission-focused and service-focused events than we did golf tournaments. And again, there's not a right or wrong. There's just different benefits one way or the other. But we found some interesting things. We found that our donors gave more money when asked. They're still going to give if they're asked because of the relationship. How much they gave was influenced by what that child or that family was doing. So we saw our donation averages going up. And then in 2012 or 2013, we had the biggest thing that happened in our company from a fundraising standpoint. But I keep talking, so let's bring it back to you.
This is good because what I'm hoping, and again, giving ideas where I think there's people, I've gone to these golf fundraisers before. I had no idea they were not that profitable. So I was going this is such a good thing we're supporting here. This is great. But I did not know. I'm actually going to text a friend after this because he's the one that kind of leads those and be like, hey, how much money do you actually make off that? Because I've never asked him, and he's a really good friend of mine. Because he does that and sporting clay events. Those are two of the ones he does. And you got me thinking. So I really want to hear about some of these new ones that you guys are doing, because what I love is you've kind of flipped the script. You're doing things that are different, and they're not just here's the chocolate bars, here's the card to sell for $20 with coupons on it that nobody's going to use, for this year. And so I'm excited to hear some of these new events that are fun and they're different. So let's get into these. That's nitty gritty now.
Okay, that sounds good. Sidebar real quick, sporting clays far superior to golf. So
Ooh.
if you're looking for an event that's primarily engaging men, not exclusively, there's a lot of women shooting these events as well, but you're looking for something that has the ability to involve more people, costs less, takes less time away from work, but yet can still be a go-to charity fundraising event all the way up the C-suite and executive level, down to working class and all the way out into rural settings. Sporting clays is far superior to golf. And I'll give you a quick reason. Number one, they're fresh and different as opposed to stale and same old thing. Number two, they can be done year round. At wintertime especially, you can wear extra padding and clothing. It minimizes the recoil. Number three, they're very safe. Number four, they cost less per shooter than it does per golfer. Number five, it takes less time to do a normal charity golf tournament. It's a 5-hour deal. Plus you've got registration on the front end and awards on the back end. So you're talking about 7 hours. Sporting clays, still registration on the front end, awards on the back end, but your actual shoot is generally about 2 hours to 2.5 hours. So it doesn't take an entire day away. The key though, just like golf, is the revenue model. You want to have a fundraising revenue model that's based on individual shooters raising money through their friends and family. You can still do corporate sponsors. You want to also add some other areas of opportunity, which would be underwriters, matching funds donors, and alumni engagement. So sporting clays, I would put in the smart category of recreational events, sporting events. Golf, I put in the dumb category. All right. So, but going back to your question, better ways. So we found ourselves actually at my very desk where I'm sitting here on our conversation today. Back at the end of 2012, we were going through a sort of a season with our company, with our leadership team. We had a small executive team at the time. And we were reminiscing on the early days of the 100-hole golf marathons and how much energy there was and excitement. People wanted to be part of it just because of the concept, even if they didn't know much about our ministry, and they still raised money. And so we were going through about maybe a 3-month season of prayer. And we're asking the Lord specifically for a brand new major fundraising event concept. So something that had the ability to raise significant money, something that had wow factor, sort of like the golf marathon days, something that, but different, something that was meaningful and purposeful, sort of like the service day events we were doing, the serve days, but something that even if it didn't raise a dime, was good. It was impactful. And what we were trying to figure out as we were praying through the season, we knew that all these teenagers and adults that go on these mission trips into other parts of the world, most of them come back changed for life, right? There's something very deep when we go in and we serve, especially in a third world country, and we see the contrast, and we experience the blessings of giving and serving other people. We're trying to figure out, is there any way we can help achieve some of those hard level impacts and through something that also raised a lot of money? And he gave us this idea that we call Feed the Need. And what Feed the Need is, we describe Feed the Need as an overseas mission trip that you bring into a gym or a large meeting room. It can be done in cafeteria style, level rooms. But what Feed the Need is, it's an indoor food packing party. It can be done year round because it's impervious to weather issues. First one we did was in Bend, Oregon during the blizzard, actually, a snowstorm. But kids, these would be now children at school from K through 12, even pre-K, will get out and for about 4.5 hours during this packing party, collectively, they will pack 10,000 meals. And of those 10,000 meals, a portion stay local to local ministries that are involved in hunger ministry in those communities. But the majority, we'll take those through the Champion Group and we'll ship them into third world countries like Haiti, Sri Lanka, Jamaica, also domestically into Harlan County, Kentucky, in the heart of the Appalachians, and also up into Indian reservations. So there's a variety of ways that food is distributed. Most of it goes to Haiti. But now you're taking a little Christian school anywhere in the country or up in Alaska where your home was originally, and they literally can have an impact in different spheres of the globe. And this food, as it's packed, once it's packed, it's prayed over, it's sent out. But all the money is raised through the smart revenue model, which we call a fundraising engine. The same fundraising engine you can put into a sporting clay shoot, you can put into a serve day, or you can put into a Feed the Need event. What we're finding with Feed the Need, fundraising records have been broken left and right with these Christian schools. It's the ideal fit. Almost every Christian school has as part of its core values, virtues of teaching generosity and selflessness and serving. And that fits right into the event experience because it's missional. It gives teachers a chance to teach their children during those few weeks leading up to the event what it's like to grow up in Haiti or Sri Lanka. So kids start to gain a more global missions focus. But interestingly, donors are giving more. It's a higher donation average than any of the other events we've ever experimented with. So let me just say this real quick, Mitchell. This is not an infomercial. Please, anybody who's watching this, that is not the intent. The intent is to share things that we've learned in terms of why people give. They give based on relationship, events to avoid or things to do that can include everybody. Look at how you can engage your children in missional service, impact, give back types of events. So anyway.
That one I love, and I would love to hear the financial side of it real quick. Do people donate? Say, hey, would you put up money towards us making meals? They say, I'll put up 100, I'll put up 50, and then they take, a piece of that, and it goes towards paying for the rice and beans or however you guys pack it, and then the extra just goes to the school. And is that publicly told to the person what percentage, or how does that kind of work?
Sure. Yeah, it's all told, it's all above board. So depending on how much a school raises, typically they're looking at netting anywhere from 55 to 65 cents out of every dollar. So that would be the profit side. The Feed the Need is very expensive because of the cost of the meals, and it's the meal and ingredients, but it's the shipping, especially now that we're dealing with increased diesel, and then the overseas component of shipping is part of that as well. But the excuse me, let me just make sure we still on track together, Mitchell.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. But in terms of how the money's raised, we describe our fundraising engine as having 5 different components. You have your peer-to-peer. So every family they set their own dollar goal, but typically the family's looking to raise $1,000 to $1,500 per family. So let's say in your school you have 130 families. Your family goal would be around $130,000 raised. Now, most families average less than that, but that's one of those components. Another component is getting corporate sponsors. So these are businesses that would be recognized in local publications and other media that they might want to push out on their own as supporting a youth-focused humanitarian effort if they aren't believers. A lot of companies will not support religious organizations, i.e. Christian schools, because of just issues. A lot of times they'll have policy where they say we don't support religious organizations. However, many times they'll support Feed the Need because they can look at it as humanitarian. Looking at key donors in the school that may be parents or grandparents and asking them to be matching funds donors. Would you consider matching some of what our elementary school families are trying to raise? Mm-hmm. So you're looking at these different components, and you're using the energy that Feed the Need creates, because it's a really exciting event. That energy helps drive the money from these different areas and bring it all in. Almost all of that money is raised before the day of event. So the Feed the Need packing party is the culmination of about a 12-week fundraising campaign.
Man, I love that one because you're hitting on multiple levels, and it's easy for that. Like you already mentioned it, going, oh yeah, I would definitely give more for that. Like it's an easier thing than others that I've heard of. So,
guess our average donation with Feed the Need last year, and it's bumped up. I can't remember what our most recent stat is, but last year was $114 average donation. When people are used to giving $15 or $20 when they buy candy bars, or they're used to smaller increments through other types of fundraisers that schools do, and now you're talking about an average of $114 donation, it becomes very significant. Let me just insert here. Any schools that are interested in looking at not just Feed the Need, but how do we raise money more effectively? we're a real source of free information. We're here to serve. We'd love to just provide some pro bono ideas to people. So again, not trying to pitch just what we do. We'd like to help in any way.
I appreciate that. And
Yep.
if you have some more, I know that sounds like the bread and butter right now, the one that's going really good. If we were to just pitch like quick ones, let's see how fast we go. Like, hey, here's 5 really good ones that we've had success with currently or over the years that maybe a school could do on their own, possibly. But if you could pick maybe 5 of those, what would those be?
Okay, so Feed the Need is the biggest and most successful we've ever been part of, and it hits all these other areas in terms of missional. Secondly, we're doing something called 30 and 3, but it can be done similarly on their own. 30 and 3 is raising $30,000 in 3 days using a purely virtual texting campaign. Again, people give to people they know, and most people, that 0% statistic, 0% of adults love to fundraise, but whereas most people are uncomfortable picking up their cell phone, calling somebody saying, hey, would you sponsor us? Most people are very comfortable texting. So 30 and 3 is a 3-day texting campaign. And we ended up developing this during COVID because of all the lockdowns. People couldn't get together in person. But a similar concept can work very well for schools. Number 3, I would say a serve day. Serve day is in between morning and afternoon carpools, so you're not affecting family schedules. Position your school based on classes or grades to go in and do serve-a-thon, service impacts around town, still monetizing it through the peer-to-peer fundraising. Number 4, for schools that they're a little larger and they especially have a pretty solid medium, middle income family dynamics, live dinner auctions can be very effective. They tend to be labor intensive, but they can, if they're done right, they can generate a lot of money oftentimes. And the 5th, what I would say is when you start getting down now to what I consider the smaller, some people call nickel and dime level fundraisers. These would be candy bar sales and those types of things, oranges, poinsettias, et cetera. There is one that I think that actually does have value at the smaller level, and those are discount cards. And especially now as we're going into worse inflation, you're giving parents something of higher value where they can get discounted oil changes or restaurants or other things like that. So That's a quick summary.
That was a really quick summary. I like that the serve-a-thon idea of having the kids serve. It's again checking kind of all those boxes, kind of like the meals one. So I really like that. If the school was, I guess let's talk about size. Maybe we'll just do that first.
Okay.
So I'll see a lot of Christian schools. They range in size. I would say the majority of ones I've talked to, at least on the podcast and interviewed, is anywhere from that 100 on the low end to maybe 300-400 is like the average. We've had some big ones on there. Is there kind of a point where a size is like too small, where it's like this one probably wouldn't work well, or one where they're too big, where you're like that one's going to be a little too crazy to manage with that many kids?
That's a great question first of all. And when you look at the overall range from small to large Christian schools, the average Christian school is around 200 students. So that we think of that small because that's compared to public schools, but that's the average size. We made a deal with the Lord back in 1997 when we started the Champion Group. And this is his company. He can bless it or not. We'll follow where he leads, and we'll work with any ministry, even if it's tiny and we lose money working with it. That from day one has been our heart. And over the years, we were tested with smaller Christian schools. The smallest one that we've worked with had 19 students. It was in South Carolina. And just like the other ones that had 32 students or 54 students, we kept thinking, all right, Lord, this is where we pay up. We're going to lose money on this. And sure enough, even this 19 student school raised just over $30,000 gross dollars. So what we've learned is the size really is not as crucial. Now, the smaller the school, the easier it is to do school-wide campaigns like texting campaigns, because the smaller schools, there's still a sense of community and family. Once you start getting up to 250, 300 size students and larger, especially the larger schools, you lose a lot of that family feel, and it's much more transactional. I'm a parent. Here's my tuition. Don't bother me. The larger the school, and we see this directly in our statistics, the larger the school, the lower the percentage of parent fundraising engagement, whether it's in our campaigns or candy bars, whatever it is. Again, it gets into that transactional. So our favorite size to work with is from maybe just under 100 students to 300 to 400 students. That's really the most effective, because communication is easier and you've got that family community dynamic that's so powerful.
Okay, that's the sweet spot. All right.
Yeah.
And then how often should these be done, or could they be done? Of course, you were like, hey, we're going to do this meal prep thing every week for the whole year, everybody, and make all this money, or once a year. What's kind of that sequence?
Great question. So there were the short answer is 2 major fundraisers a year. Try not to do any more, and try not to do small scale stuff because you distract. Starting back around 2000, late 90s, early 2000s, there were 2 mega trends that began to happen in Christian school fundraising. And this is the same trend for all school fundraising. Number one mega trend was a departure from product-based sales. So your magazines, magazines, food items, candy bars, stuff, those product sales. There was a mega shift from product-based selling fundraising to more event fundraising. The other mega trend that began to happen around the same time was a trending away from large volume, multiple small nickel and dime fundraising to 1 or 2 or 3 big fundraisers, which is very smart, working smarter, not harder. You've got to be very careful if you're a school leader. You don't want to go to the well too many times, or you don't want to go to your parents and volunteers too many times without starting to create some parent burnout and volunteer burnout, which is very significant, because if you burn them out in this year, it's going to be 2 or 3 years before they're willing to probably re-engage well. So best practice is no more than 2 major fundraisers a year. Try to typically fall and spring is when most of these do it. You want to look at things that are complementary. So you always want to have one of those is that peer-to-peer, parents going to their friends, hey, would you sponsor us? You always want to have one of those 2, that type of event, because what that does is it breaks out of your parent base into a significant population of people who've never given to the school before. So one of the keys to becoming really sustainable, financially sustainable long-term, is to have a consistent pipeline or a systematic way of bringing first-time donors, it's called new donors, into your school donor base. And when you have a school, as they get larger, typically you have general fund that's looking at school-wide fundraising needs. Then a lot of times athletics has its own budget that's trying to fund. Parent-teacher organization or PTO, they're trying to fund their own. So you start creating these internal competitions. So you want to be real careful as a school leader not to start going down that path where you now have 3 or 4 different entities all competing for money. You want to coordinate that and organize that well from the top down. And if you are able to do fundraisers that raise a lot of money, now, instead of people trying to do their own separate fundraisers, you can split the pie. Everybody can align their energy behind one major event, and athletics is going to get a cut, and fine arts will get a cut, and PTF or whatever. So let me say one thing, Mitchell, because I forgot to sort of shape this at the beginning. Everything we've talked about right now is operational level. It's year to year. Most of the schools that we work with, Christian schools, will do these major fundraising campaigns to basically fund their tuition gap, because most schools' tuition does not cover all the needs of the school, so you've got this gap. So looking at tuition gap funding or scholarshiping or special projects. But at a higher level, what's most important for those listening to this podcast is you need to have a strategy, a very specific strategy that gets you from a year-to-year survival or budget focus to becoming truly financially self-sustaining. And many schools can get to this self-sustaining place within just a few years, 3 to 5 years. But everything we're talking about now would be a component of getting to the larger picture. And what we'd love to do is just open their eyes to how do you get to that larger picture of being not too dependent on tuition, to where you're fully sustainable.
I love that. Thank you.
Yep.
I'd asked you about the 5 best ones. I'm going to throw a curveball at you. What are the 5 worst fundraisers, Don, that people, if they're listening, they're like, Oh man, that's the one we do. And you know what? It is a struggle. Maybe they do make money with it, but if, in your opinion, if you can, I'm throwing you a curveball here. 5 worst. What are the 5 ones?
Mitchell, you're a great interviewer. We've had no coordination prior to this call, so this is all just jumping and going. Very good question. Number 1, I just say pretty much across the board product sales, whether it's candy bars or pizza or cookie dough. I don't mean any disrespect to those companies, but what you'll find, gift wrap, people are tired, and most of the time you can go to Walmart and get or other places and get that same food, or Amazon, cheaper than you can get it through the fundraiser. So it tends to be a lot of energy output for very small margins, and you're spending at least 50%, generally closer to 55 to 60% when you factor in other expenses on those campaigns. So product sales, I'd say be a no. The small stuff, car washes, bake sales, again, I put that in the no category, unless it's like a small team and you're not trying to raise a whole lot of money. I would put this one in the category, but I actually really like it. Have you ever heard of Cow Drop Bingo?
I have not.
All right, this is a legit, and it's really a legit fundraiser, especially rural. You take a football field and you take white paint and you grid it off length and width, so you have a whole bunch of grids, squares, just like a big bingo board. So you have A through Z down one side, and you have 1 through whatever down the other side, and people sell squares, and literally like a bingo board. And on the big day of event, you typically have a couple of spotters up in the stands with a spotting scope. Sometimes they're dressed in tuxedos, and you bring out a cow or multiple cows. And that cow grazes on the grass, and wherever it drops a present, those are the squares that actually win prizes and incentives. And it's totally hokey, and I absolutely love it. And I would love to see one. And some of them really raise a lot of money. So I'd put that in the in-between, bad or good. I think it's actually worth doing if you can, or at least considering, because it's fun. But back to the bad category, there's so many different product sales. I probably have to use up a couple of my 5 just saying product sales.
Yep.
And I would put golf tournaments back in that category. I sure would, because of the things we discussed earlier. If your objective is more social, fellowship, and visibility, I'd say the golf tournament's fine. If your primary objective is raising money, I'd say don't do the charity, that entry fee model. It'll be a waste of time, and it won't get you far down the road.
Man, I love the cow one. I think that needs to be moved into the other category, Yeah. But when you started to talk about it, I was starting to put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, okay, I think I got it. And then you threw me a curveball. I actually was thinking people were going to throw things that were quote unquote like cow poop, and they were going to throw it into the squares if whoever got it won.
Well, hey, I like that. You can take that to the next level. Yeah.
Well, it reminded me of in the city of Talkeetna, Alaska. I don't even know if they do it anymore, but they used to have a moose dropping festival. And they would, at the end of the year, they would take all this moose poop and put it in this bag, raise it up high, and everybody would bet on where this moose poop, that's right. It was moose poop with numbers on it that people bought. They bought moose poop, and then they drop it. And if your number hit the bullseye or whatever, you got $1,000 or something funny. And it was that was a riot. People would all come around from other cities to go to this tiny town of 1,000 people, 500 people to do the Moose Festival.
Well, let me frame it, because I know we're about to run out of time here, but let me make a couple of really clear takeaways for people. Number 1, we've been talking about different events and variations on themes of golf at night golf and 1 club and 100 holes, for example, or moose poop versus throwing the poop versus the cow on the field. Those are all event-focused questions, and I want to make sure the listeners are not getting focused. Okay, we need to figure out the right event. The real takeaway is the most important thing is not the event; it's the revenue model. Be smart about how you're going to raise money. That becomes that engine I talked about, and you can take this engine and you can put it into almost any type of an event, because that's going to drive the money. You'll see this a lot with larger charities in larger cities. You'll have all these creative fundraisers, and just across the board, creative logos, creative themes. But over and over, what's happened, and I've seen it all my professional life, they forget. Okay, it's many times at the end, it's like, how are we going to raise money with this thing? Are we going to charge tickets? Are we going to do this, or entry fees? Ticket sales, entry fees, those things really never drive much money. So be smart about the revenue model, that engine, and then be creative on the event that you want to design, but make sure that the design of the event is secondary to the smart revenue generating plan.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, Don, as we wrap it up, I'd love if you can, where can people find you? How can they find out about you plug your website or contact
Yep.
him?
So please call. We will help in any way. As I mentioned earlier, we're a wealth resources just for free pro bono ideas. Our website is thechampiongroup.com, thechampiongroup.com. And we can just give a variety of benefits. The bigger part of what we do with the Champion Group, you'll find this interesting for those listening. I'd like them to understand this too, is for probably 25 years of my professional life, I was under the mistaken opinion that money was the problem. So if a ministry had more money to work with, or a Christian school had more money to work with, they would be more impactful in whatever that mission was that God has called them to do. And it's not true. Money is not the problem. And we saw this over and over and over, hundreds of times, as we help ministries set fundraising goals, reach fundraising goals. And then within a year, they were back in the same problem. So what we've learned is ministries and Christian schools have a real heart. Christian schools have a heart for children, for education, all of the things we think about. But there are very few who are not dysfunctional and not very excellent in how they organize and how they run their business side, their organization side. So most of what we do is help ministries and Christian schools break out of this survival, mediocre level of operating because the hearts are right. There's just a lack of knowledge of how much better it could be, to become truly transformed through organizational excellence. So we do strategy consulting, board governance, strategic planning, financial sustainability. If a Christian school is tired of just trying to make it each year to year, there are ways to get way ahead of that financial struggle and become truly healthy. And what you'll find is when Christian schools become excellent as an organization, how they pay their teachers, how they market themselves, then all of a sudden the school ministry thrives like crazy. And we measure thriving by ultimately what we call discipleship infused education, spiritual transformation of their kids. So that's most of what we do, but we'd love to help in any way.
I've loved this conversation, Don. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I'm thinking people can take more than one thing from today and be like, I got this. I'm going to be able to raise some funds, and if they obviously need help, I'm hoping they'll reach out to you. But thank you for giving of your time today, and continue to be pouring into that all these schools that need help. And looking forward to going to Birmingham, grabbing some barbecue with you one day. All right.
Come on, invitations for everybody. Free
Thanks,
dinner.
Don.
Okay, thanks.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Don for taking time and being on the podcast. He's doing some awesome things for schools, specifically Christian schools, and I'm just wishing him and his company nothing but the best as they continue to help Christian schools and all the different things like business development, strategic planning, fundraising, and so much more. He's an awesome guy with an awesome team. So if he mentioned anything that you guys are interested in or need help in, please reach out to Don. He'd love to hear from you, him and his team. And as always, guys, if you are a school and you're needing help growing enrollment or trying to find better ways to connect with your families, I would love to hear from you personally. You can reach out to us on our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. Or please, if you're a school leader, join our private Facebook community just for school leaders called School Success Makers. You can find that on there, and I'd love to personally see you in there. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or ideas, also let us know those. We only get better by hearing from you guys to what kind of content you guys want to hear, different guests maybe you want to hear us interview, and all of that. But we will be here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.